Central Texas Mycological Society Myco Hangout, everybody. We are joined here tonight with Erin, Cressy. I'm saying that right? Is that correct? Okay, cool.
Yes.
Sorry.
Congrats.
I was switching over on my screens and everything here, so I didn't see you nodding. My bad. She is from Shroomtown Fungi. Oh, my name is Philip. He, they pronouns. I am the president of Central Texas Mycological Society, and will be the host for y'all this evening. Erin is the founding manager member of Shroomtown Fungi, a specialty mushroom growers collective, expanding mycelial network through Houston, Texas, and beyond. Cultivating and rotating seasonal selection of culinary and medicinal mushrooms for sale to the general public. So Erin, how about you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started into mushrooms?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Phil. And thank you to CTMS for letting me come on here and talk about all this. Really, really appreciate it. So my interest and fascination with mushrooms has, been a part of my life for several years now. I've always been interested in growing my own food, and I was living in a very cramped New York apartment for several years. And so I started my research on that, thinking about things that were space efficient, that didn't need a lot of light, that didn't need a lot of inputs. And so mushrooms were always very attractive to me. And then also are just a fascinating thing to grow. So I started looking at it from a cultivation perspective from the outset. I started really seriously growing mushrooms about a year ago, maybe a little over a year ago at this point. And pretty quickly, it became a hobby that was out of control. I was growing like 5 different varieties, and I had pounds and pounds and pounds of them, and I couldn't give them away fast enough. And it was like, I have to get into a farmer's market. I have to find a way to get these to somebody. So before I ever anticipated it becoming a small business, it was a small business. We started selling at 2 markets, one in the East End neighborhood of Houston and one in the Heights. And, just kind of selling off our surplus. But the demand very quickly exceeded the supply. I realized, even though I'd been kind of connected to farmers markets prior to that as a customer, once I became a vendor, I realized how high the demand was for mushrooms, particularly specialty mushrooms, within the Houston food scene. Just also with retail customers that were really interested and engaged with the product, who were already fans of mushrooms, either as foragers or home cultivators. And I very quickly developed a pretty vibrant network of friends and, online friends that I hadn't necessarily met, but would, chit chat with me about growing techniques and things like that. And then COVID hit, which was actually remarkably good for the business. I already had a pretty good delivery infrastructure in place at that point, which, makes it sound much more official than it was, because my whole cultivation setup at that point was home-based, and I was just delivering them myself. But I was making deliveries, 3 to 5 times a week to people's homes during the first couple of months of, COVID shutdowns, the scarcity at grocery stores and things like that. There was just a really high demand. I acquired some new customers and some new relationships with folks that some of whom might be on this call right now. But I realized that even though there were clearly so many people in Houston that wanted my product, I was not funded enough, and I was not equipped enough on my own to be able to sustain that growth. I was basically spinning my wheels. And I unfortunately do not come from a lot of, financial privilege. So there were no alternative sources for me to get funding. So it was either take out a massive loan in the middle of a global pandemic to try to grow my business, or pause, take a step back and listen and learn and see what was going on in the world. and figure out what to do about it. I already had been very interested in co-ops for several years. I had always wanted to start a cooperative grocery. That's always where I thought that my first kind of co-op endeavor would be. And I actually was selling to Central City Co-op in Houston at the time that I was thinking about this. And then it just kind of hit me that there were so many people that I knew who I had formed relationships with that had expressed an interest in growing mushrooms, that had access to some resources, but not enough resources to make a go at it on their own. And for those of you who already are very pro-cooperative, it's always resonated with me that people with a common goal are going to be stronger together when they share their resources and when they share in the benefits and the risks. So it just felt like a natural thing to do. I resolved to do it. I put out a message on my social media. I was expecting maybe like 5 or 6 people to get back to me, and it was more like 30 to 35. We started communicating. That number has since dwindled into a more consistent core group, but we've been meeting regularly for the last few months, planning, getting logistics together, figuring out how we will properly organize a much larger business than I was previously, but ultimately distribute to mostly, I think, retail locations, also chefs, wholesale, but also hopefully loop in an educational component and an outreach component to be able to teach people about mushrooms, teach people how to grow food, and also just make them accessible to the greater Houston community.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so much juicy stuff that we can get into there, but I maybe want to put it out there to anyone who is kind of joining from the Houston area that like CTMS totally, I had the idea of starting up chapters around Texas in order to like have local communities surrounded around a local fungal community that we can all like kind of hang out and get to know each other and kind of also be a part of a statewide organization that truly reflects Texas and all its biodiversity and have chapters in all the different bioregions that we can work on learning about fungi together with. So something to keep in mind. So maybe the mushroom growers co-op doesn't have to be so overwhelmed with education, but help cultivate the Myco society in the area, because it's already starting to grow pretty rapidly, and it's really easy to go mushroom hunting in the national forest out there. So, but I kind of want to jump back a little bit to what your home growing setup is like, because I know a lot of people probably have questions about like how you are growing mushrooms in your home. And maybe
Yeah,
people who have questions could start to maybe raise their hand and ask them if they would like to.
for sure. If people have specific questions about my setup, I'd be happy to address those. But just to give you a broad overview, my setup as it previously, which it'll be drastically different in a couple of months. But when I started out, it went through many evolutions. I wish I had, if I could go back, I would have just paid the money to buy the right equipment first. So if you're thinking about setting up a grow space in your home, just buy the thing that you think you need. But I thought I didn't have to do that. I went through a lot of different, I worked harder, not smarter, and I tried to configure a bunch of, tents and shelving units. Some were isolated so that I could keep species separate from each other. Ultimately, the different misting techniques. Ultimately, what I wound up with was pretty low tech, which was a plastic encased PVC frame, about, I want to say like maybe 8x7, basically the better part of a bedroom, I guess. It was air conditioned from the inside. And then just with like a HEPA filter kind of going through that, but basically a home unit, AC unit was small enough that was sufficient. And then I was hand misting. Every attempt I made to do that within a home automatically was inconsistent and unsuccessful. Maybe those of you who are more tech savvy would have more success, but as I told Phil earlier in this call, I'm not, I'm the opposite of that. In a different environment, I'm happier with my hands in the dirt, being very practical. So a lot of tech stuff is not, it feels very foreign to me. So I hand missed it. I felt like it gave me more control over things. I could give different species who might be growing in the same room different levels of moisture throughout the day. But I also was working a work schedule that allowed me to be in the room several times throughout the day, which I realize not everybody has. So automation might be more valuable to you if that is your situation. If you're working long hours or you're away from home a lot. But at the time that I decided to take a break, I was growing 3 to 4 different varieties on any given week of specialty mushrooms, always lion's mane, always blue oysters, and then usually a specialty oyster, like golden oysters, pink oysters, chestnuts I did in the fall, shiitakes I did in the fall. And yeah, just tried to keep, I knew that I wouldn't be able to sustain a bunch of different varieties in such a small space, but I tried to keep it for my customers.
How were you doing your propagations? Like, what were you starting with, and then like what process, what steps of the process were you doing? I guess
Yeah.
were you making auger plates or?
Yeah. So I had, like I said, very low tech. So I was doing some experimentation with making my own grain spawn and things like that, just from liquid culture. But the vast majority of the stuff that I put into production was commercial grain spawn. And I did that for consistency. I know that if I had continued in that small space, it was what allowed me to maintain consistency with batches that were, high risk, high reward, basically. But I didn't want to risk spoiling my whole batch because it was such a small batch as is. Moving forward, what Shroomtown is aiming to do in our new space, which will be significantly larger and will have designated spaces for propagation and lab work, is that we'll have our own lab where we build our own cultures. And then we will use satellite, like people's homes, basically as satellite labs, where we'll test out strains to see if they're viable for commercial production. And then we'll have a home-based space, which will probably for the first few months be using commercial cultures just to get us generating cash flow. And then eventually those will be replaced with our own house-made cultures.
That's really cool. I especially really like the like kind of the centralized gene library for all the different cultures, and then the distributed production. That's something I've kind of thought about. So I guess this kind of makes me want to talk a little bit more about like the cooperative model and why. What really draws you to it? I know you kind of mentioned some of the risk mitigation factors to it, as far as like kind of distributing some of the financial burdens of starting an enterprise. But I guess what are some more of your thoughts on that, and why do you feel like it really this mushroom farm will really fit the co-op model well?
Yeah. So yeah, I could talk about this all day. I'm sure you agree, Phil.
Yeah.
But like I said, we live in a society where a lot of the people who want to do these types of things don't really have the funding or the resources on their own to do these things. I was able to start Shroomtown on the very modest budget I had because one of my relatives passed away and left me an unexpected chunk of change. But even that small amount of money that I had was not sufficient to, if I could go back, I would have said, save it and wait, because I wasn't able to get past that threshold that I would have needed to expand and sustain the demand that was there for my business. It was very clear that my you know, the failure of my business that I saw on the horizon would not have been because people did not want my product. And that's a real shame. I think a lot of small businesses fall to prey to that trap because they just don't have the security that they need to sustain those risks. And that's where co-ops are really wonderful. They allow people to not only uh, share in those risks, but also it provides more equity to the people who work for a company. I didn't want to have employees. I wanted to work for myself, but I also wanted to be part of a community. And while I still haven't met a lot of the Shroomtown members in person because COVID has kind of ruined our plans to have classes and do fun things together, uniting over this common goal and this shared vision has been really wonderful. I felt really alone as a small business owner, especially during COVID, trying to hustle to get all these things done and planning for this in the future. Not only has given me something to look forward to in a really bleak time, but it's also given me people to look forward to it with. And I'm hoping that in the future, this will not only be a great community of people, but it'll also be a great source of income for the people that have decided to join in this venture. So yeah, spreading cash in the local economy, teaching people skills that they want to learn, and allowing business ownership opportunities to people who otherwise can't afford it. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, spreading spores, definitely.
Yeah, I love how beautifully it comes up in conversations all the time. How the way that mushrooms and fungi function in the world is really similar to how cooperatives function in a society. Sharing resources and kind of being one large network that has a really broad reach. So yeah, it's a fun parallel.
Yeah, I think mushrooms, particularly as we go into like, a more pronounced era of climate change, and we look for alternate food sources. Like people talk about urban agricultural a lot, and then they usually, like, the example that they point to is like growing lettuce inside a shipping container or something like that, one of those kinds of things. And that, I mean, that's great. It can work to a certain extent, but where it's just not very nutritionally dense. And so where I think like fungi kind of also play into that, like, as far as like dealing with the environment too, like, and then being able to, like, the model that y'all are have is kind of distribute those growing points throughout a geography that I can make it a really stable food source for a lot of people. And yeah, it seems like a great way to grow the co-op model
Yeah,
itself. Yeah.
definitely. So yeah, it's been a really exciting thing to discuss. Obviously, we're still in the really early stages of, we're not putting boots to the ground yet. We have our warehouse space that we're going to use, that one of our members is allowing us to use, which is pretty amazing. The beauty of having people in your group that just happen to have things on hand that they can give you. So hopefully we'll be moving into that soon and starting to actually grow again. But something that's been, I kind of lost my train of thought, but
No worries.
I think I'm remembering what you were saying, but
I was just talking about, I guess I kind of lost my train of thought too, because my kitty cat jumped up on my lap here.
you were talking about what a food source they are, and how with climate change we're having to adapt and find new ways of providing.
Oh, right. And especially like, and in a kind of along those same lines, like as we need to like lessen meat consumption due to the dynamics of the atmosphere, the pressures on the atmosphere that especially conventional industrial meat production does. We need to find food sources that actually can meet people's calorie needs. And that's why I particularly like growing mushrooms, and why I think growing specialty mushrooms are kind of a good thing for people to get into who are interested in urban agriculture and growing food in cities, as opposed to like where most people go to, which is like the hydroponic lettuce farms and things like that, which is
yeah.
yeah.
It's a very similar method, typically, especially if you're doing indoor mushroom cultivation. uses a lot of similar techniques, but yeah, like you said, provides a much more nutrient dense product. A low hydroponic lettuce, but it's not gonna feed us on its own. But something that I guess what you were saying got me thinking about was also something that we're talking about a lot in discussions as a group, which is also our company's commitment to leaving the spaces that we work in better than we found them, and providing hopefully an actual benefit to society rather than our agricultural processes being a detriment. Mushroom cultivation, for those of you who have done it, is not always, it can be very wasteful, especially on a commercial scale. A lot of mushroom farms grow in plastic bags that are not easily recyclable. It requires a lot of, large mushroom farms require a lot of light. They require a lot of power to keep them extra cold, which is also another reason why I would grow things seasonally to try to better accommodate what my current air conditioning system could sustain. Enoki mushrooms are delicious, but they require 40 to 60 degree temps, and that was a waste of energy in my opinion. And while sometimes the cost benefit is worth it, as we're thinking about how to plan our production schedules and our lab designs and our production space designs, there's a lot of talk about how can we do this in a way that is, we have, if we have to use a disposable product, how can we repurpose it, or how can we try to recycle it, or how can we maybe use a reusable product that isn't as wasteful. Also hoping to do some work, composting our stuff, maybe doing a little bioremediation work in the future. But long term, we want the work we do to make the earth a slightly better place rather than, worse off.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I wish more people would start their enterprises with that kind of in mind, because I mean, climate change is such a big thing that touches almost every aspect of our lives and the things that we consume. So I think it's important that we try to focus on trying to build stewardship into our things, and think of ourselves as ecological beings, and that we live embedded within an ecology. So one thing that I find really what I like about, what draws me to like cooperative business, the cooperative business model, is it kind of fulfills the axiom that a lot of people have about taking ownership of the work, and co-ops quite literally distribute the ownership of the enterprise throughout the workers in a variety of ways, which I guess we could get into if people have questions about it. But and the decisions are made democratically, through depending on the co-op, either consensus or by vote. How have you, and maybe if there's any of the other co-op members here, if they would like to chime in on this too, but how have you found working in like that democratic framework, as far as like planning a business, especially coming from someone who was doing it like as a sole proprietorship for a while, and I feel like you prefer it at this point.
Definitely. So yeah, I'll answer first, and then I know there are a couple of folks on here from the co-op, so if you want to chip in on that, you're welcome to. But coming from it being just my business to being everyone's business, I've really enjoyed. It's been honestly, I've been a little impatient with being able to hand over responsibility to people. I really desperately just want it to be a co-op already, where everyone is all on the same page, and we all are sharing responsibilities equally and all that good stuff. But because it has been my business for such a long time, and because a lot of the people are new to mushroom cultivation, and there is still a process going on where I'm kind of handing over what I know and kind of guiding the process, which I guess is why I'm the person talking to you right now. But it has been really wonderful to get input from the other people in the group. They have ideas that I would not have had. They have goals and dreams for this business that I personally didn't think of, but now I'm really stoked about. And they just have skills also that I don't have. I know that, there are some folks on this call right now that have brought some really interesting knowledge and skills into our conversations, and I think are going to be really awesome additions to our leadership team in terms of what we take on in the future. So it's been really cool.
That's great. Let's see. We got a couple questions from the chat, from the internet. That's kind of about cultivation. Do you have any tips for getting started or anything that's really simple? It sounds like you were kind of doing some pretty low tech stuff, but maybe anything that would work in the backyard or anything like that?
Yeah, wood chip beds are great. I know that you've probably had some folks on here that might have talked about that. And I think you might have done some classes or videos on that in the past.
I mentioned it in the mycology in the garden video that's on our YouTube. Yeah.
So yeah, wood chip beds, straw beds are also good. I have accidentally grown a lot of mushrooms in my compost heap because I would throw my mushroom blocks in there and then all of a sudden I get some volunteer mushrooms. That was always fun. But mushrooms are really not finicky, particularly blue oysters are always a great starter. They're very forgiving in terms of temperature and moisture. They might not look super picture perfect, but they're very, especially a commercial strain is going to be pretty, bacteria resistant, mold resistant. So if you want to just try growing something indoors, getting yourself a block of blue oysters is probably going to be a success. If you want to start, if you want to try doing any lab work at home, there are a couple of folks in the co-op that are already doing that, which is pretty cool considering it's just a hobby and has been a hobby for them. A laminar flow hood is going to be a rather expensive endeavor, but a still air box can get you a long way if you're very careful. There's some really great resources online and videos that people have lovingly put together on how to do that at home. But if I could go back, because I started my cultivation efforts by buying a ton of products because I wanted to grow like 5 different kinds of mushrooms. And then all of a sudden I was growing 5 kinds of mushrooms and I had, 30 pounds of mushrooms and I was just one person. So start small unless you want to go into business really quickly or just eat a lot of mushrooms. There are some wonderful books to get started on, but again, just digging around. Most, mushroom cultivators online are citizen scientists, and they've done a lot of work to come up with some really creative ways to do this kind of stuff at home. And you might be able to, piece something together from those videos that's going to work well for your home space. That might not be up already.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And they asked another question about like log cultivation or commercial plugs, and I mean that's a pretty simple way to do it too. You need to make sure you have like the right kind of logs and stuff and enough space to kind of keep it and to kind of keep all the logs. It's a little more space intensive.
Sure.
Do you have any experience with log cultivation?
I personally have never done log cultivation, but there are, again, a lot of people in the co-op are very interested in that and have like really good amounts of yard space to do it in. The only thing I would say, kind of what you were getting at, is make sure you have the right logs. Not all logs are created equal. It's going to have to be fresh, pretty recently cut. It has to be the right species, so you need to know where it came from. And it can't have any other fungi already growing on it. So if you see a mushroom or, even like a lichen or a mold or something like that, where it looks like something has already kind of made its way into the wood, you're probably not going to be successful in your grow, which is going to be a real bummer because log cultivation, it takes several months for you to see anything. So to be waiting patiently for like 4 months and then get nothing is going to be sad. So just make sure, if you happen to have access to some really great freshly cut oak trees, get on it. and maybe, give me a call so I can get some from you. In the city, it's hard to find that kind of stuff, but if you live out in a more woodsy area, you might be in luck. Someone says, oh yeah, free live oak logs. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, if you know where to look, you can get lucky, and then they will yield for several years if you do it right. So it can be a worthwhile investment of your time.
Cool. Yeah, the mushroom log cultivation project that we tried, it didn't work out. We used soy wax and it got dried out really quickly and the bugs ate it really fast. So we're gonna try beeswax next time. It's supposed to be a little more hardy. So then someone else asked on the YouTube chat, how are you handling not having easy access to sterile supplies in 95 COVID masks and stuff due to COVID, or gloves and sterilizing alcohol?
So, like I said, I'm not producing right now, so it has not been an issue. It definitely would have been if we had kept producing. I got really lucky. Honestly, it was just really good timing that right before everything hit the fan in March, I had just ordered a bunch of masks and a bunch of hand sanitizer and a bunch of gloves. So I was really well stocked, and it was just me. So I was giving hand sanitizer to friends. Like, I was the hookup for a minute. And so those lasted me for probably a good 4 months. And I recently, just through basically cultivating and producing the rest of the crop that I had, until I, paused things, I guess, in like mid-April, when I, decided to give it a break. Maybe May. Anyway, who knows what year is it? I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, I just got really lucky on that. I cannot fathom how other mushroom growers are doing it right now. But it also made me very aware of how much waste goes into keeping things sanitary. So moving forward, I hopefully, these products will not be so scarce in the near future, God willing. But even if they are abundant, I'm going to be thinking of ways that they aren't as, don't have to be used and disposed of as quickly, because you can really go through a lot of that stuff. In a day.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah. Juliana's asking in the Zoom chat what the process was like to start the business in terms of paperwork. Was it expensive? Initially, no. In the state of Texas, whole produce vendors are pretty loosely regulated if you are selling direct to customers. So that's going to be farmers markets and door-to-door, like person-to-person sales, which is all I was doing. So I just needed to pay like my, the fee for my articles of incorporation. I needed to get myself insurance, which was relatively inexpensive. And, would have become more expensive if I had more and more and more markets I was selling at. I did not do, if I had started doing value-added products that were perishable, I would have needed additional licensing. I would have needed to find a commercially approved space to produce things in. I was selling dried mushrooms and tinctures, which are protected under Texas cottage food law. Again, because I was a small business, I did not have to do any additional work or pay any additional licensing to sell those things. I had to label them certain ways, and just make sure that people knew, like, it's, it is a homemade product, and, you just need to know that. But once Shroomtown moves into a bigger, grander form, we will need to be much more thorough and probably pay more money if we are going to sell value-added products specifically, or if we're going to be selling to larger retailers like grocery stores and things like that. As far as some, Thomas is the name on the Zoom, although I know there's some other people in the room as well. Asked about how I was selling to chefs and things like that. Because my product was so limited, I didn't do a lot of wholesale. I was doing, I happen to know, the folks at Rosie Cannonball and a couple of other chefs in town, and occasionally I would bring them, a couple of pounds to run a special or to fill in some gaps in their supply. Like Wooster's Garden, Pedro Rex, things like that. But moving forward, a chef can really put whatever they want on their menu, as far as like who they get their produce from and things like that. There are things that you're supposed to do, particularly when it comes to more products like meat and dairy. Those are the things that Texas really cares about as far as regulations. Also shellfish, that kind of stuff. But produce is pretty unregulated. To my benefit, maybe it's something we should be concerned about on a larger scale, but it made it pretty easy for me to get started. Oh, and Hector, thank you. Thank you, Hector, for the question.
So what kind of advice would you give for somebody who's interested in getting involved, either with your co-op or starting their own? Like, I guess maybe starting their own first, and then like, if someone's in Houston and they want to start to reach out to y'all and get involved, how would they do that?
As far as starting your own co-op, ours is not completely started yet, so I might have a better answer for this in a year or so. But right now, I would say what was helpful for me is that I already had a nice group of people on social media that were aware of me, and some of whom had already bought my products and met me at a farmer's market, something like that. And the way I would translate that is, if you've got relationships, find like-minded people. It's way easier to find them first and then say, let's do this. I was lucky that a couple of people just came out of the blue and wanted to do this, but I put your idea out there, basically. If you think it's a valuable thing, and you think that if you have faith that there are people out there who want to do what you want to do, just broadcast it. And there's a good chance that people will find you.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I mean, that's more or less what we did with the Central Texas Mycological Society, and I mean, it has a cooperative structure as well, even though we're not, I guess, a for-profit enterprise as like the mushroom farm would be. But it's we still are managed in a democratic way, and that kind of, and come up with our decisions that way. Someone asked if y'all are recruiting now.
Yes. Yes.
So how would people go about getting in contact with you?
Yeah. So I will, if you want, I'll drop my email in the chat. It's just shroomtownhtx@gmail.com. If you are interested in joining the co-op as a member, we are going to be functioning within the greater Houston area and within Houston proper. So if you don't live in that area, you're absolutely welcome to, stay involved with us and maybe do some work for us, but you probably will not be able to do a whole lot of production with us, unfortunately, at least for now. But if you just want to stay in the loop on what we're doing, shoot me an email. Let me know what you're interested in specifically, and I'll add you to the appropriate email lists and all that good stuff. We're actually having, if you're interested in actually becoming a member, it's non-committal. No one's signed any paperwork yet. So far, I'm legally the only person that's still tied to Shroomtown, but eventually we will be onboarding, all new members, and we'll all kind of be on the same playing field. So if you're interested in that, we are having a general meeting this coming Sunday at noon. It's going to be on Zoom. So you can tune in from wherever. And if you want to just listen in, we'll be kind of recapping what we've been talking about for the last couple of months, setting some goals for the next few months. And you can decide, if it's something that you want to be a part of. yeah, we'll be hopefully kicking off a fundraising campaign pretty soon. So there are all kinds of ways that you can support what we're doing, or learn from what we're doing. We're always happy to share what we're learning or what we're doing. If you just want to take it to where you live, it's totally fine.
Yeah, that's I think that's one of the coolest things about like cooperative business models is they're pretty transparent, and most people who are starting co-ops or have started one, they want to see more people grow in co-ops. And so and mushroom cultivation, because especially indoor cultivation is kind of a thing that can be translated around relatively simply. you know it's not so limited by geography. I mean, some
Yes.
limitations like you're talking about, like it's hard to grow enokis because it doesn't get as cold here, but that's like kind of a minor thing compared to
Yeah.
like you need a lab and a and a fruiting
Yeah.
space and a way to keep it humid, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, it's a easy thing to teach people how to do. It's easy to share, and we want to share it. So
yeah, that's I mean, so much got derailed with COVID. I know, like that was going to be a big part of, because I mean that's like one of the biggest things that we wanted to do with our in-person classes and like getting together is like teach cultivation classes, because people really are interested in doing it in a variety of ways. And our kind of goal was to have like some pretty entry level coursework that taught you to do it the lowest tech ways possible, getting and then have some more hands on, or I guess we could do it all hands on if we were all in person, but having
yeah,
like more in depth like lab cultivation and like
hmm
how to start, what do you need to have for a mushroom farm and things like that.
yeah,
And
definitely.
it just got a little bit harder with COVID.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's been
hopefully
a real
that's over
bummer.
soon. Yeah.
We have an education committee that at the outset was, super engaged and putting together, all this great training content for our members, because a lot of them, and a lot of the people who have joined are beginner cultivators. And even myself, I'm not a particularly experienced cultivator. So we would all kind of be learning together and building from the ground up. So we were kind of getting a routine together of like common knowledge that we all wanted to have to build a baseline together. But we unfortunately kind of maxed out what we could do without meeting in person. And we've started getting together in small groups just to work on clearing out our warehouse and setting that up. But I'm really, really anxious, and I think a lot of members are eager for the day that we can get together and start really working together, because mushrooms, you have to put your hands on it, or it doesn't, you can't
Right.
learn it.
Right. Well, if they want to reach out to Central Texas Mycological Society, we can totally help coordinate some of those educational resources with y'all, because it sounds like we're
Yeah,
working on similar projects, so we definitely would love to help
yeah,
out.
that would be much appreciated, and I think we would love to be involved, and with whatever you guys are working on. Um, yeah, because no sense in reinventing the wheel if you
Yeah,
guys.
totally. And definitely when y'all have your fundraiser kickoff and everything, let us know and we'll shout it out, because like that's there's like principles that cooperatives operate by, and one is helping out other cooperatives.
Yeah,
So we definitely want to embody that.
yeah, sure thing. Yeah, it should be kicking off in the next couple months, so we will keep you in the loop.
Yeah. Oh man, it's been a wild couple of days. I don't know. This might seem like an abrupt shift, but like for me, the I mean, we can see how. I mean, obviously, I'm referring to like the what happened at the Capitol building yesterday, and the right wing um, MAGA mob uh, storming the Capitol building and everything. And I know it might seem like very tangential to like mushroom cooperatives and things like that. What does that have to do with what this whole thing is? But I think like it there's so much that can come out of like one, like the unity, like we were talking about earlier, um, of like working together on a like a common project like this,
Mhm.
that we can use, that just brings us strength in that community. But
Yeah.
also we can use that organization to push back on the things that happened yesterday. Like it doesn't
Yeah.
always have to be a normal thing, but um
Yeah. It's
like
been,
we oh, go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I don't know, I'm kind of like rolling off the cuff and kind of thinking out loud a little bit, which can be dangerous sometimes, I know, but um
Well, what you got me thinking about, is I don't know that I've really shared this with the members that much, but um, in the times that we're living in, which are really scary and really divisive, no matter what you believe that someone else is the complete opposite of you, and it can feel very polarizing and very isolating, especially at a time when we can't really connect with the people that we are the closest with and that we feel the most bonded with, at least in the ways that we like. Um, Getting on a Zoom call and talking with people that are committed to democratic and like fair conversations and um, reaching a common goal together is just really therapeutic for me personally. Just to sit and be with a bunch of people who are respectful of each other and who honor what each person brings to the table. And most of them have never met each other, but it's just everyone in the group is just a real star and um, just clearly decent human beings that want to like work in a way that and act in a way that lifts each other up and gets us all where we want to go. It gives me hope that
yeah,
you know we can create and by example, create a world that is more that way than the other way.
right. Hector said in the chat, mutual aid is the future, and I totally agree with that
Yes.
because and like and you brought up like democracy and like this co-ops or democratic organizations. Like obviously, what happened yesterday was an extremely undemocratic thing, and so like one going back to like why the argument of like why you should start a co-op out there in the audience is like it gives us a chance to like embody something that's like really deep, a value that's really deep with in our society, the value of like democracy and having people's voices heard, not only in that political realm, like when we go vote, but in the economic realm where we uh, spend a lot of time in our lives, at our work and things like that. So it's
Yeah.
where we don't have much of a say, and I know some enterprises and organizations are better than others, but some of them are pretty autocratic and very much in contradiction to how we view freedom.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that obviously the co-op model is like an attempt to break out of that but still
Mhm.
have like an organizational structure to get things done.
Yeah.
Um, and
And the
then
proven
mushrooms. Oh,
success
go
and the
ahead.
proven success of so many co-ops in the states and globally, proves that
Right,
it's
right.
to do things differently.
Right. Like the biggest example of that is the Mondragon Corporation in northern Spain. It's like a 100,000 member workers co-op that's cross industries. So um, yeah, the potential for these enterprises are limitless.
Mm-hmm.
And a little bit more about like mutual aid and where mushroom cultivation fits into this is like they're so prolific. So like usually you when you're farming mushrooms, you um you take you like sell the first maybe first or second flush, and then usually the mushrooms aren't as big. The it doesn't it's not as profitable to have it in the fruiting space, but there's still a lot of mushrooms that come out of that. The mycelium can also be expanded, put onto new substrate that's maybe not as high quality, but still makes food. So it can be used to feed people in times of need outside of that. So I think like as it's something I kind of want to help develop with the Myco Society a little bit more, maybe in conjunction with some of the farms around here, but helping figure out a way to like really expand that mycelium to help, either Food Not Bombs or some of those food
Hmm.
distribution places have, good quality protein going to
Yeah,
them.
definitely. Because when you're looking, I mean, when you have an organization, like CCMS or, like what we're hoping to be, that's looking for opportunities to do that kind of stuff, if it's built into your company's like fabric, it's not hard to find ways to do that. If expansion and profit is not the, obviously they can be great, but if that's not your be all end all, um, there's a lot more possibilities for what a company can focus on and what they can, you know,
Right.
use their power for.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was going to answer Alan's question. If he was looking for, specific supplies, I would get my stuff from all over the place. And also I was, I'm an impatient person, so I was constantly experimenting with different methods and things like that. Also different providers and things like that. The kind of industry standard for polyethylene grow bags is unicorn bags. You might have heard that name because a lot of people use them. They're actually they distribute out of Texas. So they're pretty easy to get around here. They are expensive. So there are other providers you can get them from. Most of them are going to be made in China. And China is really good at mushroom cultivation. So they have a lot of products that are going to come straight from there. As far as inputs like sawdust, I mostly use sawdust and soybean hulls because I found it to be very consistent and I got a really good yield without a lot of fuss. I played around with other stuff. It wasn't worth the risk for me, but I would typically get those things from feed stores. I also actually kind of pre cooperative mentality had another mushroom farmer in town who would order large pallets of stuff and would sell me some of what he bought at cost because he was just a nice guy. And helped me, lent me some of his used equipment and did some other things. So I kind of got a hookup in that way. I think that moving forward, we'll probably be buying large quantities of things and then hopefully sharing small quantities with our members if they want to try things at home and stuff like that. Because it is really difficult to buy like a 50-pound sack of something at a reasonable price if you just want one. And so best of luck to you on that. As far as cultures, there are so many wonderful cultivators out there that are some specialize in specific types of cultures. If you're looking for reishi, if you're wanting to maybe experiment with cordyceps, there are breeders that specialize in growing interesting and really vibrant strains of those mushrooms. But for other stuff, North Spore is a big company, and their cultures were always never had any issues with their stuff. So I found myself going back to them over and over to get product. It comes from Maine, which the fact that it came to Texas in high quality, I think, speaks a lot to how good of a job they do. So yeah, for general culinary strains, I had a lot of luck.
How did you find your sawdust sources? Because when I did it, I looked up hardwood furniture makers and kind of asked them about what kind of wood they used, and that's how I was able to find a pretty decent amount of that waste material. And also,
Mm-hmm.
just a quick thought on the mutual aid and food. Like that's another really great benefit of mushroom cultivation is often the substrate is extremely cheap, so the
Yeah,
production
yeah.
aspect of it is really cheap, and a lot of the times like the highest cost, as in with most production, is the labor cost that goes into it, because
Mm-hmm.
those inputs for mushroom cultivation are relatively inexpensive, almost if not
Yeah, and some of
completely
it
free.
is stuff that the company doesn't want, that would just go into the landfill otherwise. So yeah, if you've got a good, like I said with the logs, if you can find and you're willing to do the research to get yourself, a nice hardwood supplier that'll get you some sawdust, and you have a way to get it to your property. That's always going to be a great outlet. If you don't, very few sawmills or lumber mills are going to be just cutting one type of wood, and won't necessarily be able to sort it out for you. But oysters grow really well on mixed hardwoods. Lion's mane generally prefers oak, but will grow well on mixed hardwood. And so if you're wanting to just, maybe try those varieties, you'll have good success with just kind of a mixed bag of hardwood sawdust. The problem is that there really can't be any pine in the mix, or it will slow things down a lot or inhibit your grow entirely. So that's where it gets tricky, and you have to do a lot of research about where, what's happening at the sawmill that you're talking to. I ultimately, because like I said, was growing such a small amount at any given time, and it was just me, was going with like smoker pellets, because I knew that it was only going to be hardwood, and it was, I could look at the breakdown of what was in the material. Moving forward, I think I would be better off getting my product somewhere else, but because I was just using such a small amount at a time, that made more sense for me.
Yeah, it can be tricky sometimes to find stuff that's like to the quality that you want.
Mm-hmm.
I
If
guess
you're
it
just,
kind of
if you're just playing around at home, it's no harm. Because I wanted to make sure I was consistently yielding, I had to be more conservative than I would have been otherwise.
yeah. Um, and I think another good point to about like sawdust and thinking about it is like you also want to make sure you have stuff that's like kind of fluffy, and you don't want to get stuff not that is solely like the smallest particle size, because you want to make sure you have air in
Mm-hmm.
your bulk substrate, in order for the mushrooms themselves to breathe,
Yeah,
because they need a lot of fresh air in order to get
yeah, definitely.
nice growth. And if yeah, it can get very anaerobic if you just have that the super fines in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, you'll get waterlogged real fast. Um, and that was nice, also being able to control like the texture and things like that. I if you are brave enough to experiment, go for it. I think some people really love playing around with different mixtures and growing on different inputs and different supplements and things like that. um, I just wanted to keep it simple, but the possibilities are endless there.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely found something that I liked, and wanted to not deviate from that because it worked well. So yeah, once I definitely was not into experimenting, but I was in a very limited growing setup anyway too, so
Mm-hmm.
kind of had to
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been fun, like, because on social media, a lot of folks from all over the place will message me, because all they see is like your mushroom farm, and so they have questions and things like that. And they're growing on all sorts of different stuff, sugarcane, cottonseed hulls, millet or oats, or the types of inputs that they use are very regionally influenced. Like a lot of straw cultivation happens more up north and in the Midwest. Straw doesn't really, it's very hard to find in Texas. We have a lot of hay, but not a lot of straw. And you can't grow mushrooms on hay. It will not go well. So straw cultivation is not practical down here, at least in my research. But we have a ton of oak wood, so hardwood stuff is pretty easy to come by.
So is I guess for the mushroom farm, that's what y'all are going to be focusing on, is mostly using oak hardwood substrate for the bulk substrate then?
Most likely. We have not. Uh, when we get back in from, we kind of had like a little holiday hiatus, and when we get back in after our next general meeting, I think our production committee will start getting more down to the nitty gritty about how we want to start things, and what we'd like to use for our initial formulas, what mushrooms we want to grow, at least while we're starting out. And but yeah, most of the prime culinary mushrooms oysters, lion's mane, chestnuts. They like hardwood sawdust and they thrive on hardwood sawdust. And so if you're wanting to grow a wide variety, that's where you're going to have most success. Oysters grow on straw, but most other stuff won't grow very well.
Cool. Now I kind of have a question about like the Houston like mushroom geography. Like, how are y'all? You said y'all are gonna be doing wholesale and like to retailers are and people are gonna be um fruiting in like in fruiting chambers in their at their homes or like in their garage or whatever. Are y'all
Mhm.
going to be sterilizing the substrate out there at each individual like site and then inoculating them at the site, or like are you going to be having like one bulk inoculation point like closer
Mhm.
to the lab and then sending out basically like calling inoculated bags to the
Yeah.
distribution
So
the
this is
different
something
growth points?
this is something we've gone back and forth over a lot. And again, it's all hypothetical right now. So
Right.
in 2 months, I might tell you, this plan didn't work. But what we're planning on doing right now, based on the space that we have available, we put out a survey to our members a few months ago saying, hey, if you're interested and willing to use any space that you own as a grow space for the co-op, fill out this form, tell us the dimensions, tell us, the power abilities it has. And if it sounds like it's going to work, we'll come out and take a look at it. So we went through all that info and went to see a couple of the sites that sounded the most immediately appealing, particularly the ones that were the biggest and the best located. So we have one member whose family owns a business with a large warehouse. There's a big shipping container in the back where we're going to be using that as a fruiting space, a large fruiting space. That's going to take a lot of work to get it retrofitted for that, though. We also have another member who might be on the call who has a kind of a garage apartment, small space, but still, pretty good size. So we used as a fruiting space initially. And then we have another member that has a rather large warehouse in his family that we will be using. We'll be outfitting a smaller office within the warehouse to be our lab. And then there will be a direct pathway out into that warehouse, which we will use as a colonization space. So our contained blocks will colonize there. Maybe some of them will fruit there at some point, but essentially those blocks will then be transported to the fruiting spaces where they'll be placed in fruiting conditions. Obviously, if we had the money to put this all in one building, we would, because this model is very complicated and requires a lot of driving and a lot of coordination. But it allows us to do this without paying any rent, which is a massive savings for us, to the tune of thousands of dollars a month. So it allows us to get started way sooner than we would have otherwise. And the long-term goal is that we'll be able to eventually transition into our own designated space that's outfitted in the way that we would, dream that it would be. But I think that this is going to, might be a little crazy initially, but I think it'll work. And I think it will be fun, hopefully, for the people who get to grow that stuff in their homes.
Yeah. Let's see. Does anybody have any questions for Erin?
Yes,
Drop
we
them
have
in the
questions. I'd like to
yeah.
follow up on the question about y'all's distribution. You kind of
Can
touched
you
on
move a little bit closer? You're pretty quiet.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, about distribution. When you guys do produce volume, or when you have that, how you do get it around to chefs or restaurants, retail wise. Kind of the further outreach of it. Yeah, kind of like if you guys ever would have conversations with a distributor to help your co-op expand and get your products, all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's talk that distribution conversation hasn't happened yet, but I think it will happen pretty quickly after the production stuff gets cemented. We're probably going to, for the first few months of production, and when we actually have mushrooms to sell, we'll probably just for simplicity's sake, sell direct to customer and also sell at farmers markets and things like that, just because we know how to do that. But I think that partnering with a distributor is going to be the long-term, necessity, I think, especially if we were going to be selling anywhere outside of the inner loop of Houston, because it's a big city. But our immediate goals in terms of outreach are local, and interpersonal. So if we can, we want to build those relationships with people first, even if it takes a little bit more work on the outset. But yeah.
Oh no, of course. I used to participate in, we used to call it the send a farmer home program, and we would just make sure that we would buy kind of, be like, what do you got citrus wise, buy it all up, and you get to go home and go back to your grow rooms and grow more mushrooms and focus on kind of what you wanted to do, which would be, growing mushrooms, outreach, and getting your name about. But I think I'm a distributor that sells mostly to restaurants and things. I sell cultivated mushrooms from Mycopia. I sell wild forage from, Pacific Northwest, even imported in from Albania and Italy. But we're always looking for local people, or people are always buying local mushrooms. And, we meet these young faces and they're growing mushrooms, and then, they get hit in the face with the fact that, hey, you got to buy refrigerated trucks. Those trucks depreciate in value. Your company is going to be a couple years in until you really start to see the fruit of that labor. So, I mean, me as a company that sells imported goods, I would see value in teaming up with a company or some a co-op in this way to promote that education. And in listening to this conversation, I thought it would even be cool to, have somebody that could pitch your mushrooms in a way and be like, hey, man, these are lion's manes grown off of, a hardwood substrate, or these are lion's manes grown off of a food byproduct from your local restaurants, which would be a pool of you guys to obviously, align yourselves with somebody with the same principles, or to again, promote your name in that way. But yeah, it was a pleasure kind of talking to or hearing what you had to say about kind of the co-op group, or what you're trying to do in bringing all these people together, because really, I think having all those inputs and working democratically on something, creates a good product. So
yeah, and that's great to hear from someone who's in that side of the business. Could you tell me your name? I know you're not Thomas.
I'm Travis. I'm Travis Hughes.
Okay.
I work with a company called Regalis Foods. I sell some food to Thomas and his pop-up. So I've just recently expanded down here to Houston, and going to the farmers markets here is really amazing. It's really, you see so many chefs' faces there, and the community here is great. So for me, it's just it's a good opportunity, or just something to look at too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great to hear that from you, and I really, it's good to connect with someone who's in that side of the supply chain, because we're just looking at it from like a producing perspective. But I think, obviously, if we don't know where it's going to go, they're going to spiral really quickly. I know when I was just producing on my own, I was getting a lot of requests from markets to set up stands there. So I think that is, just in terms of having an immediate place to sell our product, that's probably where we'll go. But in terms of long-term growth and sustainability, I think having set revenue streams and, wholesale clients, and also retailers that, will buy a steady stream of our products, is going to be really necessary to our long-term survival. So I may be in touch in a few months.
Yeah, well, I hope so. That'd be great to hear from you, and good luck on your grow rooms and build outs and all the other collaborations that you have going on.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Speaking of build outs and such, someone asked on the YouTube chat, what skills or resources is the co-op lacking at the moment? And yeah, so what do y'all need as far as like getting off the ground? Obviously, being able to meet in person would help a lot, but
yeah, that's a great question. So whoever you are, thanks for asking it and giving me the opportunity to answer it. First of all, we have a really great and broad skill set in the co-op already, which is really neat. Lots of, some tech savvy folks, some very scientifically minded folks. I'm very like hands in the dirt, like, hammer and nails, doesn't want to think about anything else. So it's nice to have more kind of high-minded or detail-oriented folks on the team. We have a couple of people who are financially skilled, but we could always use more people who can do the more tedious bookkeeping and tax stuff and things like that. It's managing finances for a co-op is pretty complex. Making sure that everyone is equitably compensated, and also that their taxes are right and that we're filing our taxes properly is going to be a real pain in the butt. Also, on that note, we desperately need someone. If you know anyone who has legal skills or is a lawyer or knows a thing or two about, agricultural law in the state of Texas particularly, that would be really helpful. Anyone with any expertise in agricultural regulations, even if you just know it because you've studied up on it for some random reason, would love to speak to you. We've obviously been doing our own research, but Google can only take you so far. And the last thing we want as a group is to have anything we want to do derailed because we didn't cross a T or dot an I properly. So yeah, if that's your strength, please reach out to us, and I would love to have a bit of your time. Much appreciated.
I want to throw in real quick. I put a link in the chat for a woman who can help with legal stuff too. Like she helps start co-ops in Texas, or helps other people start co-ops in Texas. Her name's
Slotman?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I had not heard of her, and I will definitely reach out to her. She works at the Central Texas Farmers Co-op?
No, she helps us start that one.
see.
She works for the Texas Rural Cooperative Association.
Okay.
And if she doesn't know those kinds of answers, I think she'd be good at directing to people who can help.
Awesome. Yeah, that's wonderful information. Thank you so much.
Any more questions out there? How many are there? Like a lot of specialty mushroom farms in the Houston area, or are y'all kind of going to be one of the only ones operating?
I mean, there are a good number. I've become aware of more of them since doing it myself, because we have a way of finding each other. But Houston's a big city. It's a really, really big city. So honestly, we could become a massive business, and there would be room for a couple more mushroom farms. In my, minorly informed opinion, but the fact that I have been able to exist as a small business and never feel like I was bumping up against anybody else. I mean, I was a very small business, but I've gotten nothing but support from other mushroom farmers that I know in Houston. I think that no matter how big we get, reasonably, there will always be space for the people who are currently farming. Um, there's also plenty of room in the suburbs, in Tomball and Katy and Pearland, to they're basically whole cities within themselves that don't have a lot of access to specialty mushrooms. And the folks out there want them just as much. So it's once people know how good they are, and how fun they are to cook with, and how nutritious they are, want them all the time. So it's just a matter of getting to people, making them accessible to people and affordable, and having a place where they can buy them.
Yeah, that. I mean, that's really cool. I mean, obviously, it is one of the our country's largest cities, but just like that, it's such a growing, I guess, a growing industry in the United States that it's kind of the sky's the limit. I mean, we see how much if anybody is already familiar with some of the economic data around it as far as like global culinary mushroom production, it's already $1 billion industry, and most of that's in China. So like we have a whole bunch of people here in the United States who aren't eating mushrooms and would probably really like to, especially like as I mentioned earlier, we have people are starting to search for meat alternatives and eating food that's produced closer to home.
Yeah, definitely. And there are definitely parts of the states that are pretty saturated as far as the market, where there isn't really a whole lot of profit to be made in this business, this particular niche anymore. And I pray that one day, we're there where it's like there's so much access that they're super cheap and you can get them anywhere. And I think that'd be great. Just as far as the general health and well-being of Houston. But Houston has a really big food accessibility problem also, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that our company will be able to reach a lot of areas that don't have access to food in general. And by the time, that we are, one of a million mushroom companies, we might be doing, larger work on just getting food to Houstonians in general.
Just got to keep growing the co-op and just have one and get all the different farms to join up with y'all, and we'll have one big mushroom union, mushroom growers.
That's my dream. I don't know how everybody else feels about it, but that sounds great to me.
Well, in my opinion, we should just abolish the commodity form around food at least. But I probably won't get my way in my lifetime, but we'll see.
Yeah. We can dream.
So if we don't have any more questions, that might be a good place to end it. A little bit of anti-capitalism to end the night. So yeah, I guess if no one pops up soon, I'll give it a little bit of time for the YouTube chat. It's the YouTube is a little bit behind us talking immediately, so give them a second. But if not, I will play the outro music, which sadly no one on the Zoom call can hear. But if you liked what we're talking about tonight and you would like to help out, contact us. Also become a member of the Central Texas Mycological Society at centraltexasmycology.org. And you can find out about more what we do here, but your membership dues help facilitate events like this, and a much more exciting. I mean, not that this wasn't exciting. I don't know. I'm doing terrible at this right now. Terrible at doing these pitches. But when we can meet up in person again, we're going to do lots of fun stuff. We've got some cool, we got more internet stuff coming up on. That's really fun. We have Alan Rockefeller is going to be talking about bioluminescence on our third Thursday lecture. So everyone be sure to tune into that or catch the recording on our YouTube channel or Facebook page. Make sure to like and subscribe if you want to do that, because that helps us out a lot, and leave comments. let's see. I think that's just about everything, everyone. Watching out there on the internet land. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and we'll see you next time.